Washington Supreme Court ruled the state's voter-approved charter schools unconstitutional.
Oh, I remember that day vividly. It was devastating. It was absolutely devastating.
The statewide teachers union and the League of Women challenged the voter-approved law last year.
And then I got a phone call from a dear friend of mine who is actually a charter opponent. And she said, well, charter schools have been declared unconstitutional. They're absolutely illegal, and they're going to shut those charter schools down.
Charter schools don't qualify as common public schools and cannot receive that public funding.
I'm disappointed that I came to this new great school and then the government was just trying to shut us down.
I mean, it still brings up such raw emotion.
And I made a decision in that moment that this was a fight that I was going to fight.
It's a few days into the school year in Tacoma, and Rokisha Williams and her family are settling into a morning routine. This year, all 4 of Rokisha's children will be in schools in Tacoma, from kindergarten to high school.
Janai, he's over at Summit Olympus. He's in the 10th grade.
I just want to be successful. Having good grades, getting into college, getting a degree, having a good job that pays a lot.
What's this? Jahari, she's in the 7th grade at Destiny. She's my shy kid. Now Josiah, he's at SOAR Academy, and he's entering 2nd grade this year. Jave, she is entering kindergarten. So it's going to be her first time in full-time school. And, you know, she's the last one, so she's the baby.
And it's the 2nd year they'll be in public charter schools. In 2012, voters in Washington allowed privately managed public charter schools to open for the first time. And in 2015, 9 schools began classes serving more than 1,000 students.
The reason why I decided to send my kids to charter schools is because the current schools that we were in Tacoma just weren't working out for us. Just when I was, had no other options, they came to town. And it was, just perfect that they had one school for each grade that one of my children were entering.
We are working on job applications this morning.
Rokisha got very involved in the schools, meeting regularly with administrators and other parents. Along the way, she discovered that she wasn't alone in her desire for other options for her children. Many parents here see charters as a solution for students in underserved populations.
Especially for my 7-year-old, when he was in kindergarten, he just wasn't really doing well behavior-wise, and we always knew that he was an accelerated learner, but couldn't really stay on task.
My son, who is autistic, he was bullied relentlessly from 4th until 8th grade, and it was very traumatic for our family. It became violent. We had no help from our school district, which led us on that choice with my daughter Isadora to look for an alternate schooling experience. We can't afford private school, as many people in the struggling middle class can't. We don't qualify for any subsidies or anything, and we sure as heck don't make enough to pay for anything outright.
But just as classes got going last year, a ruling came from the state Supreme Court. It put their schools in jeopardy.
When our state Supreme Court said charter schools are unconstitutional.
The primary finding of the Supreme Court was that the existing charter schools at that time were using revenue, state resources, that would otherwise be available for the common schools.
And they waited until we got settled and the kids got comfortable 3 weeks into school, and then just kind of ripped the rug from under our feet.
Happy, great, cutting ceremony, the whole deal. And my son comes out of his room and he goes, "Mom, are we gonna have to put Isa back at that school?" Sorry. And I said, God, I hope not. I mean, it still brings up such raw emotion because this is so much of my time to fight for. So much of these children to fight for.
Essentially, their reasoning was you cannot use money that is designated for traditional public schools for these charter schools because they're not governed by locally elected school boards. And that was the crux of the decision.
They also argued that the money being spent on charter schools, I think it was around $10 million this last fiscal year, was inappropriately used and contributed to the fact that we are underfunding our public schools. That was a major argument.
Washington has a long history of not funding schools properly, according to our state Supreme Court, and it actually dates back to the 1970s.
The state Supreme Court had already put the legislature on notice that schools were deeply underfunded in Washington, which led to inequality across the state. To force the legislature to act, the court set a fine of $100,000 a day until they fixed the funding issue. They haven't complied.
It's not that they find the individual lawmakers, they find the state as an entity. And what's funny about that is the legislature has to pay the fine, so they just didn't.
Some who are opposed to the charter school provision believe the state has to fix school funding first before allowing what they call a new school system to be started in Washington.
Charter schools drain funds from our public school system.
We strongly support fully funding our public schools and continuing to provide locally elected school boards the flexibility to innovate and meet the needs of all their students.
Backed with funding from major players vested in school choice in Washington, including the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, charter school administrators, parents, and students headed to the state capitol to lobby for a solution.
Our kids and families headed to a few different rallies. We went down to Olympia for a day of action. We wrote very adorable Valentine's Day cards and different thank yous to our legislators.
They made the case that charter public schools are public schools, open to all, and they offer an alternative for parents of students who have not been served well by existing public schools.
There's few things more important to a parent after the health of their child, and that's the education of their child. So a lot of passion about that.
Once the legislature reconvened, pro-charter lawmakers worked on a new bill. The key challenge was to fund charter schools in a way that did not take money away from other public schools.
I think on the opposition side, there was a genuine and very legitimate concern that we may be putting our public school system at jeopardy.
On a slim majority vote in both houses, lawmakers passed a revised public charter school law. It uses money from lottery funds that they say are not directly available to other public schools.
Boy, I hope we fixed it well enough. I don't want to have this fight again. It's painful, it's not comfortable, it pits otherwise really good friends against each other.
Welcome all my SOAR families. Thank you for making it out here. We love seeing you here.
With the new school year beginning, SOAR Academy, where Rakisha's two youngest children attend elementary school, holds a picnic to kick off its second year in Tacoma.
Let the whole Tacoma community know that we are here to stay, right? SOAR Academy is here to stay.
But even as they celebrate, the fight is back in court. Just before schools opened, a lawsuit was brought by a similar coalition of educators and parents who brought the first suit. It claims the new charter school law is still unconstitutional.
They can pass down all the lawsuits they want to. We're just going to do the same thing. We're going to rally, we're going to scream and yell, we're going to go to Olympia, and we're going to fight it.
Several of the plaintiffs and the attorney who filed the suit either declined or did not respond to requests to be interviewed. But the complaint says public charter schools still do not have boards directly accountable to voters. And it says lottery money is public money that should be spent on existing schools.
It's a question still how the court will decide that, whether the funding issue is solved or whether the issue of governance is still going to be a problem constitutionally.
Good morning. I'm Sherline Wilson. My son Miles attends Rainier Prep, a charter public school here in Seattle.
Parents from charter schools in the Seattle-Tacoma area and Spokane say they will fight to the finish.
I want to be clear. This lawsuit is nothing more than a threat and a political ploy to rehash policy arguments in a courtroom by recasting them as constitutional concerns.
Shouldn't I, as an individual citizen, be able to say, enough, I'm done, I need to find something more and something better, and my child is worth it?
At the end of the day, the good news that has come out of this whole effort over this last year or so is that we've just now seen some of the test results of the charter schools. And they are by and large doing better than their public school counterparts.
This fight started for my daughter. This fight started for me to find a way to atone to my son. I wholeheartedly mean it with every fiber in my body, that when I say that, this fight, I do feel like I'm getting atonement from him for all the other children that had to go through all of this.
And now is the time. And we're not willing to wait anymore for these solutions to be put in place. Our kids' education and lives are at stake.
We deserve to have a choice of where we send our kids to school. It doesn't work for everybody, but it works for us, and we should be able to take advantage of that.
Mom, can you please come push us? Go as fast as you can. Go as fast as you can.